Live from Lagos, Nigeria, this is News Central. I'm Felicity Ezewike. The top stories tonight. APC considers court action over Adeleke's victory as INEC defends credibility. ASU threatens strike as over 200 academic staff leave Kaduna State University over poor conditions. And President Trump threatens strikes on Oman if Muscat interferes with Iran talks.
In business, Nigeria's inflation falls to 15.43% in July as food inflation hits 5.56%.
And in sports news tonight, NFF sacks Super Falcons coach Justin Madugu and his technical crew following failure at the just concluded Women's Africa Cup of Nations.
Glad you're here. Tonight begins shortly. We'll begin tonight with election martyrs. 295 suspects have been arrested in connection with various incidents during Saturday's Osun State governorship election. The full spokesperson said 293 suspects were released on bail after screening, while 2 remain in custody for further investigation and prosecution. The arrests were made as security agencies intensified surveillance across the state to prevent violence, vote buying, and other electoral offenses. Police said the 2 remaining suspects would be prosecuted based on offenses established against them. Meanwhile, the APC says it is reviewing results from the state's 332 wards after Governor Ademola Adeleke was declared winner of the 2026 governorship election. Staying with Osun governorship polls, the Independent National Electoral Commission has dismissed claims of ghost and hired voters during the election. INEC's Chief Press Secretary, Dayo Oketola, says the bimodal voter accreditation system made such voting impossible, as only registered and accredited voters could cast ballots at designated polling units. He also urged Nigerians to be wary of unverified information and videos circulating online, warning that misinformation and disinformation could distort public understanding of the election. Oketola stressed that the use of BVAS means voters must be registered and accredited before participating in the electoral process. The British High Commission has commended Osun voters for their peaceful participation in the August 15 governorship election, while highlighting challenges that require attention. The commission said its accredited observers found polls opened as scheduled in many locations, while security personnel maintained order and INEC officials effectively implemented electoral procedures. However, it raised concerns over isolated incidents, vote buying, limited access for persons with disabilities and elderly voters, as well as overcrowding linked to BVAS accreditation. For more on this, Kimpact Development Initiative Program Manager Mercy Abiam joins us now to share thoughts and insights from observing the elections. Thank you very much for being here with us. How would you rate the overall conduct of the polls, and what would you say were some of the biggest challenges highlighted across board? Would you just say the ones highlighted by the High Commission was most accurate?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. The Osun State governorship elections, Kimpact Development Initiative was an accredited observer group that participated in the elections, and we had observers deployed across all of the 332 wards in Osun State. And from observations, Kimpact Development would rate the conduct of the Osun State governorship elections as fairly satisfactory. However, there are some important shortcomings from the elections that cannot be overlooked. We all know that the elections was generally competitive and it was highly contested. But from our field observations, we identify some operational and technological challenges. From our observations in the field on the elections day, we observed that BVAS functioned fairly. Over 84% of our observations, we observed 84% success rate of BVAS accreditation. However, there are still some loopholes in the BVAS accreditation. Just 15% of our reports from the field shows failure of BVAS accreditation. Now, one would wonder why BVAS accreditation is failing, because during the mock accreditation, KDI raised concerns around the BVAS failing to accredit old voters, just like the chairman had mentioned. However, we still saw those challenges observed in the Osun State governorship elections, and also there were cases around. Though the elections was largely peaceful, we still have some pockets of electoral violence reported from our tracking in the data room where we set up, and information gotten from our field observers. We recorded over 17 cases of electoral violence. However, we did not record any fatality. This is something that from our trackings pre-elections, we had observed, we had recorded over 81 cases of electoral violence, and out of these 81 cases, we had up to like 17 deaths. But on the day of the elections, it was quite fair that the election violence cases were not as much as the pre-election cases, and then there was no fatality. So overall, we would rate the conduct of Osun State governorship elections as a fair elections, though there were pockets of challenges that the INEC and also the security agencies would need to look out for.
The police say they've had about 295 suspects, yeah? But that most of them have been released. Only 2 still remain in custody. If you juxtapose this with other elections and other figures that have been released, would you say that this is a further confirmation that we are sliding away from violence during electoral processes, and that it foretells some good things for the 2027 elections?
So just like our tracking for the pre-election before the August 15th governorship elections in Osun State, like I mentioned, we had tracked 81 cases of election violence. However, the 295 arrests made by the police is actually a significant number, but I think that should not automatically be interpreted as 295 confirmed cases of electoral violence. Though the police said that 293 of these suspects have been released, and then 2 still remain in custody for further investigation. What the number tells us is that a substantial number of incidents, or most of these suspected offenses, occurred around the election environment and they required police intervention. And then it also reinforces the need to take electoral offenses seriously rather than treating them as an unavoidable future for future elections as we head to the 2027 general elections.
Talk to us about the claims about ghost voters, hired voters, and then the electoral umpire dismissing such claims, emphasizing that beavers make that impossible. Did you hear of such observations during the polls, and were they credible to your knowledge?
So I would still link this to the mock accreditation and then the issues observed with the beavers during the elections, right? So INEC positioned that the beavers makes conventional forms of ghost voting difficult is technically credible, right? Because a person has to be accredited through the prescribed voting authentication process before voting at a polling unit. However, I would distinguish between what beavers makes ghost voting difficult and electoral fraud is impossible. The fact that beavers makes ghost voting difficult does not mean that electoral fraud is actually impossible. Like I said, beavers functioned optimally, and we had over 15% failure rate in authentication attempts, right? technology can reduce certain forms of fraud, but it cannot independently eliminate some of these attempts, right? And it's important to note that BVAS is an important safeguard, and the effectiveness of the BVAS depends on a reliable functioning of the BVAS, right? Now, we would advise that going into the 2027 elections, INEC does a complete audit of the election technology that we would use going into the election to ensure that some of these challenges that were faced with the BVAS
does not come again.
Yes, it's tackled before the 2027 elections.
Let's move away from BVAS for a bit and just talk about the fact that the APC is saying they are reviewing results and may approach the election tribunal, considering the fact that some of the APC bigwigs, including the president, has said, congratulated the re-elected governor of Osun State. What are your thoughts about perhaps safeguard necessary to reduce post-election disputes, and if we do have them go to the tribunal, transparently resolved?
So the most important safeguard is that every grievance, maybe from an election, should be channeled through evidence and establish legal processes, rather than just political rhetoric and maybe street mobilization. There are actually four things I would actually like to emphasize. First, we need to preserve the evidence. The polling unit results from the elections, BVAS accreditation data, the result sheets need to be properly preserved and made available by parties if these parties involved seek legal redress at the courts. And they also need to allow legitimate access to election materials. So for each party that is seeking redress at the courts for the elections, the materials have to be made available for inspection and then to obtain relevant evidence through the lawful process. I would also state that the judicial process needs to be transparent. We need to strengthen judicial transparency. The election petitions should be handled quite well, and the decision should clearly explain how this evidence was evaluated. It is every right of a political party to challenge the outcomes of an election, but political actors must commit to peaceful dispute resolutions and to avoid some of these post-elections, inflammatory statements, threats, or maybe an attempt to mobilize voters against maybe opposing parties while litigation is actually ongoing in court.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the news. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
NDLEA destroys 300 tons of illicit drugs worth 301 billion naira. That's still ahead on the news. Former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai has filed a 10 billion naira fundamental rights suit against the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, over alleged denial of family access while in custody. El-Rufai, through his lawyer, Ubong Akpan, filed the case at the Federal High Court in Abuja on August 13. He joined the ICPC chairman and the Attorney General of the Federation as defendants. The former governor alleged that ICPC officials prevented his wife and son from visiting him and supplying food, medication, and other necessities. He also alleges that officials physically restrained and intimidated the pair. El-Rufai is asking the court to order unhindered and reasonable access to his family and counsel throughout his detention. He is also seeking 10 billion naira damages over alleged violations of his constitutional rights. To discuss this, I'm joined by lawyer Sigwe Momo. Thank you for being here with us. Let's talk about the violations that El-Rufai is alleging. Is he correct that the denial of access to his family is a denial of his fundamental human rights?
Absolutely not. I mean, that would be a stretch. I think the entire chapter 4, which has to do with the fundamental rights of Nigerians or anybody in Nigeria for that matter, I think it has to be read in concert. You can't just extrapolate a tiny part of it and run with it. There's also Section 35, which will have to do with sometimes when you're being held, you can be detained and is being lawfully remanded. Sadly so. I personally have said repeatedly, even in this station also, that I'm not a big fan of the current bail regime that we have in Nigeria. However, that's the law we have now. Once you are detained, once you are being charged, you can be remanded until the trial is dispensed with. And I think that gives rise to a lot of abuse as it can. But is it lawful? The answer is yes. Is it proper? That's the conversation that should happen, happen another day completely. But to say that denial to counsel is different. You have a right to talk to your lawyers as often as you can, pending the matter, but to say your family, and also realizing that part of the reasons why the court want to keep you in is so that you don't meddle with the fact, you don't distort the ongoing investigations, even though the matter is still in court, and and all that, and probably commit, try to hide more evidence in this matter. So the courts and even the officers can say, oh, we don't want you talking to some members, of your family who we think may help you to probably be accessories after the, fact, add to the offense in one way or another. So that's a stretch to say that.
Well, this is not the first time we're seeing such a case being brought before a court of law. The alleged fundamental, the disrespect of fundamental human rights. But can the court, in this case, compel the ICPC to perhaps allow the family and legal counsel? You said that of legal counsel is understandable, but do you think the court can compel the ICPC to allow the family visit?
I mean, fair, but I'm generally speaking. But I think one of the fundamental rights is asking for is a fundamental right to be a big man, and that's not in the 99 Constitution as amended. So you're going to ask several other people when you're saying that right now. This is not a person that's been convicted. They are saying the prosecutors are saying we need to keep him so that it doesn't delve and meddle more in hide more evidence, and they feel like the family may assist him in one way or another, give him information that will hinder the further investigation, because clearly they still say they need further investigation. So it's basically saying that you're tampering with such investigation, and that's not going to fly in here. There's no way you will say because you have a right to medical, which is fair. You can always have that in the facilities as we have it. Sadly, there's a Nigerian medical facilities that we all deal with. So I don't think the court will insist that I should see his family. It's not. It's not part of our laws in any way you look at it. It can be.
Okay, go ahead. Finish your thoughts, sir.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of discretion that the courts may look into, but at the angle I think the court is going to be looking at more is, will this in any way hamper further investigation by the prosecutors? That's all they need to say, is that we don't trust that the families are not going to be giving him secrets, are not going to be helping to stifle the ongoing investigation. And that's all that the prosecutors have, or the state has to say. And it will be difficult to upturn the current position.
I don't know if this is strictly a legal question or if there's a legal explanation or action that can be taken when he alleges that his wife and son were restrained and physically restrained and intimidated on July 7 when they attempted to visit him. Is there a legal angle here? Can the wife and son pursue legal action? Is he right to pursue legal action on their behalf? And what should be a proper conduct in cases like this, where family is being denied, when an accused is being denied access to his family?
Yes. So again, denying access to his family, typically in your home, you're fine. I think that's where they're running under Section 37. Interestingly, it doesn't just cover family. It almost seems like a parody, because it also covers, telephone conversations and all that, another offense where he's being charged with the DSS, So while the state can say typically a man should have access to his family, it's okay, you're being detained, you're an offender, that doesn't stop you from, having associations. But like I'm saying, the entire chapter 4 must be read in concert. There is 35. 35 is very important. The state can say, unfortunately, we cannot allow you have family to bring food for you, for example. We don't trust that they're not going to poison you. That's the discretion. So once a person is being properly held, how he's going to be held cannot be deemed to be against his fundamental rights. You can't just close your eyes to 35 and rely on 34 or 37 like they're trying to do now. 35 is there. So how do you trump 35? I think the emphasis generally has to be that this man has been held for so long and he ought to be released, and not, fighting or playing around technicalities.
Right.
He's still innocent, is still presumed innocent for whatsoever reason, and it's bad. The general outlook doesn't look good for Nigeria. It seems as though it's a political matter, even though there are glaring cases where, how is he going to run away from what he said that he's tapping into the foot of an NSC officer?
Asiwe, thank you for speaking with us.
My pleasure, please. Thank you so much.
The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, has publicly destroyed about 300 tons of illicit drugs seized from traffickers and dealers. The NDLEA chairman and chief executive, retired Brigadier General Buba Marwa, says the exercise will deprive drug traffickers of their investments and prevent non-state actors from accessing substances that could fuel criminal activities while keeping the drugs away from potential consumers. News Center's Victor Mbadike has details.
The street value of a kilogram of cocaine here, for instance, is estimated at 25 million naira. For tramadol, the figure is said to be around 70 million naira. Other illicit, including nicotine, methamphetamine, heroin, Canadian loud, and several others, are also among the exhibits, putting their combined street value at an estimated 301 billion naira.
That is over 301 billion naira that will never find its way into the pockets of drug barons or into the ruin of a single Nigerian home. For us at the NDLEA, behind every kilogram of these drugs lies a tragic story. A young person whose future may have been destroyed, a family torn apart by addiction, communities terrorized by drug-induced crimes, and road crashes caused by impaired drivers. This is why the fight against illicit drugs is not merely a law enforcement responsibility. It is fundamentally a battle for the soul, health, and future of our nation.
Other security agencies present also stressed the need for collective action to protect communities, particularly young Nigerians, from the dangers of drug abuse.
This is taken from operations conducted in our seaports, at our airports, at our land borders. This, therefore, represents a very strong message to drug dealers that they are no longer welcome in Nigeria.
And we know that a drug-free society would translate to more effective labor and people that would develop our economy.
Every consignment intercepted by the NDLEA saves Nigeria billions of naira in potential economic losses arising from addiction, crime, and social dislocation.
This fire is doing more than destroying drugs. It is cutting off a supply chain from traffickers and dealers to consumers on the streets. Now, every kilogram destroyed here represents one less opportunity for these substances to reach another young Nigerian. In Lagos for News Central, Victor Mbadike.
More than 200 professors and other academic staff have reportedly left Kaduna State University over poor working conditions and a non-implementation of the 2025 federal government ASU agreement. The ASU-CASU chapter has issued a 2-week ultimatum to the university authorities and other stakeholders to begin full implementation and domestication of the agreement. The union says failure to meet this demand could trigger a total and indefinite strike. ASUU chairman Abubakar Abdullahi says the delay has left staff among the least paid university workers and contributed to the departure of experienced academics. The union also cited outstanding issues including promotion arrears, pension remittances, excessive workload, and university autonomy. Let's discuss this with an education consultant, Peter Ugudoro. Doc, thank you very much for being here. I mean, 200 academics just leaving an institution. Is that something that happened in a short period of time? However it happens, can a university survive such an exodus?
No, certainly. There's no way a university in Nigeria can cope with that. Even if it's Harvard University, if that number quits their job at the same time within the same time frame, definitely the university will suffer greatly because you don't produce professors in 10 years. It takes decades to rise from the beginning stages of academic work to the point where you become a professor. And in our case in Nigeria, the younger generation are losing interest in academics. So these days, if you lose the ones who are the old hands, who are experienced, who have made sacrifices to stay there, given the fact that not many young people want to do PhD because it has become very obvious to them that that's not the route to becoming wealthy. And so you must be very careful as a government to ensure that the ones who have managed to stay put to work for the state and to help society develop the capacity to run a society that all of us desire to have. Those ones we must make sure that we do everything possible to keep them on their job. Unfortunately, that doesn't look like what politicians are interested in.
I mean, ASUU, it seems they're standing alone in this because we haven't, unless I'm wrong, we've not heard from the national body as to whether they're supporting this ASUU threat of strike or solidarity sort of for their concerns. This is a federal agreement, and it looks like some federal institutions have implemented the agreement with the federal government. So what could be the reasons why Kaduna University seems to be singled out in this case? Backlog of arrears, non-implementation of government agreement, and sundry issues.
Well, I will not want to describe it as Kaduna State being singled out because Kaduna State is not the only state in Nigeria that is grappling with this kind of challenge. Even Abia State is in the middle of this kind of challenge as we speak. Most of the states are struggling with finding the resources. None of the states
have come out to say that 200 academic staff are leaving due to poor working conditions and the non-implementation of agreements.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how the local union and the professors involved are interpreting matters, and probably given the fact that they have found alternative employment. But if you work in a place where you haven't found alternative means of putting food on the table for your family, you might have to stay put, even in an environment where you are not happy. And the academics in Nigeria are not the only ones who find themselves in that kind of situation. Virtually every industry in Nigeria is grappling with that. Even bankers are doing jobs they don't like. Even in the oil industry, many of the people who work in the big oil companies are just contract staff, even when it's on record that they work for oil companies. But so the point we are making is that the mere fact that you're not hearing about other states, quitting their jobs and trying to shorthand the universities is not an indication that they too are not grappling with the same challenge. But I think that the root of the matter should be, connected with the fact that we don't do well here in terms of negotiations. So we are not very good at dialogues. We are not very good at running inclusive governments. We are not very good at organizing inclusive negotiations. At the point federal government was negotiating with their own employees, who are the professors working for federal government institutions, we should have made sure that we also brought in those who were working for state universities so that we make it clear in the course of negotiations that the mere fact that we agree to pay X amount of money to professors who work for federal universities does not mean that the states must pay exactly the same thing, because the capacity of the federal government to pay well is definitely higher than the capacity of the average state in Nigeria to pay well, because they don't have access to the same, quantum of resources. All of these things must be put into consideration as we look at who is doing well and who is not.
As quickly as you can, let's look beyond the salaries now and talk about other concerns that was raised. One of them is excessive workload. And then they talked about promotion areas and pension remittances. How are all of this affecting staff retention? And what do you think state-owned universities can do differently to compete at some degree with federal universities?
Well, they need to get their priorities right, recognize that education is an indispensable tool for moving the state forward. Once you recognize education as the bedrock of development, then you understand the fact that without university lecturers, universities are just empty spaces. Really, if the buildings don't make the university, the professors do. Unfortunately for us, the politicians who own these places as visitors don't seem to understand that, and that in the absence of good teachers, in the absence of good university lecturers and professors, we don't have educational institutions. Most of the time, we just tend to get away with the idea that shiny buildings make university, shiny buildings make secondary and primary schools. That's not true. So the states should recognize that the way to move their states forward is to get the competent people to work for them. And the reason why you are having that heavy workload on the shoulders of the lecturers who have remained is the fact that the younger generation are not interested in teaching in universities, because they have over the years had their professors, their teachers complain that they are not being well treated, and they see that as a matter of fact, and so nobody wants to work in those kinds of places. So it's a case of the willing horse is giving too much to do, and that's something we should continue to maintain.
Dr. Gudoro, thank you very much for speaking with us, as always. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Let's tell you now that finance commissioners from Nigeria's 36 states, alongside the Minister of Finance and other key stakeholders in the nation's finance sector, have converged for the NACOFED Summit. The three-day meeting, which is focused on strengthening collaboration and improving financial management across the states, is taking place in Owerri, Imo State. The summit was declared open by the state deputy governor. My colleague, Alex Obonnaya, has this report for us.
Nigeria's economic managers are about now converging right inside this hall to brainstorm on how to strengthen the nation's economy. Tagged NACOFED 2026, the 36 commissioners across the country and the country's Minister of Finance are attending this meeting to examine key economic challenges and chart practical ways forward. And from this meeting, the expectations is clear. Stronger fiscal management and policies that can translate into better economic outcomes for the entire country. At a time when governments at all levels are seeking more efficient ways of managing public resources and improving internally generated revenue, the NACOFED Summit is providing a platform for finance commissioners and other key stakeholders to share ideas, examine challenges, and explore practical solutions for sustainable economic development. Declaring the summit open on behalf of the Imo State Governor, Hope Uzodinma, Deputy Governor Chinyere Ekomaru welcomed participants to the state and underscored the importance of collaboration among finance managers at the federal and state levels.
States must be empowered to generate revenue. Allocations must be equitable and must be built with resilience through diversification and prudent management of available resources.
The summit also provides a forum for stakeholders to exchange experiences and consider strategies that can strengthen the financial position of the states while supporting economic growth.
We speak of sustainable development because growth that cannot be sustained is not growth to be celebrated. It is rather a loan against the future, and it's our children who will be asked to repay it. And when we speak of equity, deliberately, because fiscal federalism that is efficient but not equitable will not hold.
If you think about 3 years ago, inflation was 34%. The inflation numbers came out today, inflation has halved. It's 15%. It doesn't mean that prices are not going up, but it means that prices are not going up as quickly as they were going up before. Look, the truth of the matter is that reforms sometimes are difficult, right? Improvements take time, but we must stay the course. Part of why we're here today is to ensure we work together with the federal government as states to bring these dividends back to the people.
With finance commissioners and other stakeholders at the table, discussions are expected to focus on approaches that can improve fiscal sustainability and ensure more effective management of public resources. The NACOFED summit continues through Tuesday and will come to an end on Wednesday. In Imo for News Central, Alex Obunnaya.
We are still watching tonight on News Central. Business, sports and entertainment is on after this break. Just stay with us. And one of our lead stories tonight, U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly threatened to bomb Oman if the U.S. ally interferes with Washington's negotiations with Iran over the Strait of Hormuz. Washington and Moscow have been separately negotiating with Tehran to reopen the strategic waterway, which has remained largely closed for nearly 6 months during the U.S.-Iran conflict. Iranian officials said they were close to reaching an agreement with Oman, while the future of separate U.S.-Iran negotiations remain uncertain as a 60-day memorandum of understanding approaches expiration.
This morning you said you would bomb the S out of Oman if they got in the way of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Would you say you're out of patience with Oman, a strategic partner?
No, I don't think they behaved very well, but we'd handle them very easily, just like we do.
Joanna has tonight's business update. Over to you now.
And in business, Nigeria's headline inflation fell to 15.43% in July 2026, down from 15.91% in June, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. The latest figure also represents a sharp decline from 24.94% recorded in July 2025. Month-on-month inflation slowed to 1.57% from 1.66% in June, indicating a slower pace of price increases. However, food inflation rose monthly to 5.56% from 3.75%, driven by higher prices of items including rice, pepper, onions, tomatoes, and eggs. Core inflation also declined to 14.97% year-on-year, continuing the broader moderation in annual price pressures. And coming down to the Nigerian equities market, it started the new week on a slower note, extending the bearish run from last week. We're seeing the all-share index slip 7 basis points. We're now at 242,454.65 points. Market capitalization is down to 156 trillion naira. Taking a look at sectoral performance, broad-based weakness, that's what we are seeing. Insurance took the hardest hit, down 1.48%. Consumer goods is apparently the only sector in the green, up 43 basis points. Industrial goods is flat. Banking and oil and gas are down for today on the NGX. And that's it on Business Tonight. I am Joanna Mustafa. Up next, sports.
In sports news tonight, Nigeria's junior Yellow Greens have secured promotion back to Division 1 of the ICC Under-19 Men's Cricket World Cup Africa qualifier after an impressive campaign in Kigali, Rwanda. The young Nigerians sealed second place after thrashing Sierra Leone by 165 runs in their final Division 2 fixture. The junior Yellow Greens won 4 of their 5 matches after losing their opener to Uganda, producing a strong comeback to earn promotion. They will now compete in Division 1 alongside Namibia, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and host Rwanda. The team later presented their runners-up trophy to the Nigeria Cricket Federation, celebrating a campaign that marks another positive step for the sport in the country. In football, the Nigeria Football Federation has asked the Super Falcons coaching crew, led by head coach Justin Madugu, to step down with immediate effect. The decision comes after a disappointing 2026 campaign in which Nigeria failed to qualify for the 2027 FIFA Women's World Cup and were eliminated by Cameroon in the quarterfinals of the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations. The NFF announced the directive earlier today through its official X account, stating that all members of the technical crew should step down immediately. The development brings an end to Madugu's tenure following a campaign that fell short of Nigeria's expectations, with the Super Falcons missing out on both continental glory and World Cup qualification. Meanwhile, the National Sports Commission Director General Bukola Olokpade says Nigeria must accept the Super Eagles' failure to qualify for the 2027 Women's World Cup, insisting the country cannot be defined by football alone. Olokpade admitted he was disappointed, but stressed that setbacks are part of pointing to Italy's previous World Cup absences, despite their history as four-time champions. And that's it on Sports News tonight. I'm Okpeoluwa Adebari. Entertainment is next to Sam Dandy.
And now in entertainment, Tyla has been honored with the AfriPure International Achievement Award at the 32nd, South African Music Awards, marking her second win in that category. The Grammy-winning singer, making her first in-person summer appearance, delivered an emotional speech celebrating her South African roots and the African artists who inspired her journey. She invited several fellow artists on stage and called for a more united Africa, saying she was proud to be African. Her last album, A-Pop, has received global attention with mega hits like Chanel, amongst others, as fans anticipate her world tour. Away from that one, on the international scene, this one's some sad news. Hollywood is mourning actress Hayden Panettiere, who has died at the age of 36. The actress, who began her career as a child star, became widely known for playing Claire Bennett in Heroes and Juliet Barnes in Nashville. Greenville police say an acquaintance called 911 on Sunday after finding her unresponsive, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Police say the preliminary investigation shows no sign of foul play or suspicious circumstances. Dispatch audio reportedly mentioned a possible overdose and cardiac arrest, but neither have been confirmed as the cause of death. An autopsy was scheduled for today, August the 17th, with results potentially taking up to 3 months. Very sad. That makes us whole worse and perfect peace. Those are the biggest stories in entertainment. I am Sam Dandy.
Before we go, here's another look at some of our top stories. APC considers court action over delegate's victory as INEC defends credibility. ASU threatens strike as over 200 academic staff leave Kaduna State University over poor conditions. We also told you that President Trump has threatened strikes on Oman if Muscat interferes with Iran talks. Would appreciate your feedback. Please share them with us. Use the number showing now on your screen. We're on all platforms at News Central TV. You can watch live on DSTV channel 422, Go TV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and on YouTube. Coming up shortly is Game On, but from me, it's good night.